Hi there, my name is Muhammad, and I'm the host of the Reconfigured Podcast, a show that explores the intersection of technology, culture, and society. We bring professionals to talk about their extended experience or discuss about a specific topic that might interest the audience. All of our episodes are available for free with no cost to the general public. Just a quick reminder that we are always on the lookout for interesting guests who can share their unique perspective on the topics we cover, or you can pitch in a new topic to discuss on the pod. Just reach out to us on social media or apply to our available opportunities posted on Polywork. So, welcome to the show. Today I'm with Karl. Karl, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having me. So I'm Karl. I'm the founder and CEO of Revolancer, a freelancing platform with the mission of giving freedom back to freelancers and creating a brighter future for flexible work.
So, you're the CEO of Revolancer. Would you like to talk about what Revolancer and what the service provides?
Sure. So Revolancer is a freelancing platform that's basically designed to help new freelancers starting out, but also, very much working with existing freelancers and helping them scale up their businesses. So we launched the platform about a year and a half ago or so now. And essentially, we've just been growing ever since then. We now provide a platform to well over 20,000 freelancers. And on there, they can find clients, they can learn from one another, network, exchange skills, and a lot of other things. So we're very proud of the community that we've built.
So, you're the CEO of Revolancer. What is the role and job of a CEO?
Yeah, so it's pretty hard to define. I suppose it's a bit of everything. No 2 days are ever the same. I can jump between fundraising, legals, technical sort of development, roadmap, hiring, basically, kind of everything all at the same time, which definitely isn't for everyone, but it is for me. I would say if you want to really distill it down, the two core responsibilities of a CEO are one, maintaining a good company culture, and two, making sure that you don't run out of money. So that means kind of making sure that revenue is up, making sure that you're raising enough investment if needs be. And then on the company culture side, it's just making sure that you have a really positive work environment, that you're hiring the right people and really motivating them, and giving them all the tools they need to succeed. So those, I'd say, are the two main responsibilities, but it does include a little bit of everything.
But there's a difference between the culture of a startup versus, let's say, a company. So even if, let's say, you're offering support and you're making the employees feel happy and all of that, there are some times where a startup might not feel very secure for some people.
Yes, absolutely. And working in a startup isn't for everyone. So, I'm very direct and honest with anyone who is considering working for us that, while I have very high hopes for Revolancer, it's always going to be a risk, especially with a smaller kind of earlier stage startup. It's going to be a risk. But the people who work with us are very, very talented, and if for whatever reason it didn't work out, I have no doubt that they would have a lot of opportunities to go for. So I don't think it's for everyone, but there are definitely people who it's the right fit for.
So managing a startup might be difficult, that from finding the right partners to collaborate with and key player employees to keep and maintaining the company long run. What is the method of finding the right person or people to work with, and what do you do to keep those people to stay in your startup? So you've mentioned about keeping a positive work environment, but you'd like to talk more about this?
Yes, absolutely. So the main thing I look for is kind of somebody who has is really driven by a certain kind of vision. So, I'm not looking for people who are motivated by money or that kind of thing, but, people who have kind of a big dream of, for example, making the whole world better for freelancers, and who are primarily motivated by that. And then I also look for people who have kind of a track record of exceptional ability. So I'm not so interested in someone's grades, at school or university or whatever, nor do I even care if they went to university. But what I do care about is, can they demonstrate where they have kind of, done something that's just a bit different, and, not what everyone else is doing, and achieved something there. So that's something that I really look for in the kind of hiring and interview process. And I think just the team that we have right now is absolutely excellent, and from that I can quite quickly tell when I'm speaking to someone whether they would fit in well or not. But there's a great sort of saying that I live by when it comes to building a team for a startup especially, which is hire slow, fire fast. So that's also really, really important to keep in mind, that if you have made a mistake and hired the wrong person, that you rectify that quickly, because a wrong hire in the early stages can absolutely tank the whole project. So if that happens, it needs to be dealt with quickly.
So it's about hiring the right person, but if it's about hiring the right person that you feel that can fit in the company based on the objectives that they have. And if you
Yes.
didn't hire the right person, you fire them sooner than later, or
Absolutely, yes. There is very little time, if any, to waste in a startup. So the second you identify that someone is the wrong fit, yes, maybe if you gave them, I don't know, months worth of training, you could. Well, I don't even know at that point. I'm not even sure if you could make a wrong fit the right fit. But let's say if there is some doubt. There is no doubt that there is somebody who would be a much better fit out there. And the sooner that you kind of rectify the problem, the sooner you can get the right person on board where you're not even going to have those kind of doubts.
and also long term on the product. If you fired the wrong person, they don't have to mess the product much more on the long term. So giving away passes might not work. It works sometimes in big companies because, let's say, if someone is like upper management can see someone in the lower part, then they can manage things. But when working with a startup, any kind of mistake, it's on you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, assuming the fact that you're giving an advice for someone starting a company with zero knowledge about the topic, what are the things to expect when starting your own business? So, certain elements like running payroll, registering a business government wise, operating with clients from different places around the world, or dealing with employees remotely. So, assuming the fact, let's say I'm someone who wants to start a startup, but I have zero knowledge where I want to start. Assume the fact, let's say that I'm 18 years old, I'm very ambitious, and I want to start my own thing. What kind of advice would you want to give?
Sure. So I think the number one key thing is the best place to start is with defining the problem. So I think a lot of people, when they start a business, they come at it from the perspective of, oh, this is my idea. People always talk about their business ideas, right? So this is my idea. I think it's cool. I think it's going to work. Now I'm going to build it and just like throw it at people. And maybe you'll get lucky and come across the right thing, but the chances are you won't. So the best way to actually start is to start with a problem. So maybe find an audience of people you care about and have some knowledge about. So in my case, let's say freelancers, and then speak to them, and understand like, what problems are they struggling with? And also then, when you're kind of proposing a solution to those problems, is that a big enough problem to where they would actually pay for something? Would they pay to solve it, or does it not really matter that much? So these are all things you have to figure out. And then when you're like working with your, group of target customers basically to develop your product, then you build the best possible product. You have like a good product market fit from the beginning, and you have a group of customers, who are willing to pay for it right out of the gate. And while I started, with the first step with Revolancer of having, like a group of people that I care about and know about, freelancers, I didn't follow the rest of those steps. So I was a freelancer myself, at age 13, I started, and I experienced problems with other platforms. And I built Revolancer initially from the perspective of, oh, I had these problems, and just assumed that other people did too, and that other people would be willing to go to another platform and so on to solve them. And those problems were that big. I was very lucky because I was correct, but it wasn't, I didn't figure it out in the way that I should have. And that's absolutely changed now. So I'd say that is probably the best starting point, is start with the problem. Then there are lots of other things, like, everything you mentioned, plus a million more things that are going to pop up, and you're going to need to figure out. But one really good starting point to manage all of those is to be humble and understand that you don't know what you don't know, and find somebody who does know about that and learn from them. So, for example, we closed our pre-seed round for Revolancer from that was led by a VC investor about 2 or 3 months after I graduated university, and it was my first time ever fundraising. And the reason that I was able to do that is because when starting the fundraising process, I approached entrepreneurs who had closed funding before and really knew what they were talking about, and learned from them. And kind of brought them on as advisors, and spoke to them and showed them, my kind of strategy, my data room, my pitch deck, all of this stuff, and got their feedback. And then I was able to, create something on their level without going through the years of experience that they had to, because I could kind of learn from them. And I think that's a really key lesson for anyone starting out, especially if like you say, this person is very ambitious, but they're very young, and they're 18, they're not very experienced. The best thing you can do is to constantly learn from other people, and that's something I've always done from the start, and absolutely continue to do, because never in life do you have all the answers, and as long as you know that you don't have all the answers, you're then at a really good point to discover more of the answers by working with other great people. So yeah, I mean, then when it comes to specifics, I think, when it comes to registering a business, it's going to vary from country to country. In the UK, especially, that part of the process is probably more simple than in a lot of other places. So here it costs £12, and it takes about, half an hour to an hour, depending on how much you kind of understand already about the process. But essentially I wouldn't start with any of that stuff until you've really identified your audience, really identified the problem, validated the problem, kind of then you're coming up with a solution. Only then would I think about things like registering the business, when you're sort of ready to, soon hire people or generate revenue or raise investments or that kind of thing.
So to distill it down, it's basically find a problem that you want to solve, then create a solution to solve the problem, and then see if people want to buy this as a solution, and then find people who already did something similar or did something that can help in the process of launching your business, and then start doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to building the solution, you don't want to overcommit to build, to a solution that you're building before you're certain that people are going to, actually want to use this, actually going to want to pay for it. So a really good thing is to kind of approach it from an MVP mindset. So, for example, the social media publishing tool Buffer, and that's a tool where, for anyone who doesn't know, where basically you can schedule social media posts. So it's really useful for a business. You can schedule them all in one place. And the way that they got started is they didn't build that tool, but basically they built a very simple landing page, which you can do with absolutely no coding experience and for very, very cheap, if not free. Essentially just advertising this platform where you could schedule social media posts as if it already existed. So they kind of explained, how it works, all of the features. And then they said, it costs however much, $10, $20 a month, whatever it is. And they had a field where you could enter your email address and click get started. And then you enter your email address, click get started. And then it just says, we'll tell you when we launch. Thanks for your interest. And then what they did is they had, can't remember how many, but they had a lot of people who filled in their email addresses, and then they took that to investors and they raised $500,000, and then they used that to build the product. So, that's kind of how you should be thinking about these things. You really go, an MVP, minimum viable product, keep it as simple as possible just to validate the solution. Because the chances are you won't get the solution right the first time. The chances are you'll build your landing page and not a single person will want to, sign up. But that's fine because now you didn't waste too much time, and now you can adapt, you can change things up. But only when you've really found something that is very promising, only then should you start actually committing a lot of time to building it.
And on finding the right people that can ask to for advice, where would you recommend going to? So you've asked a couple of people for advice on certain things for regarding your startup. But if I want to ask someone, where would I find them? Probably I won't just ping some person on LinkedIn telling them, hey, I have this startup. Can you help me? It's not going to work that much. But do I have to go to certain places, or is it like I get connected with someone who I know that can connect me with someone else?
Yeah, so warm introductions are great. So definitely, ask people in your network if they know anyone. When it comes to networking generally, what I found is usually the best places to network with people who can give you very valuable advice is not at networking events or not necessarily through LinkedIn. Though I have met great people through LinkedIn, and I'd say that's a great starting point too. But for example, when it comes to fundraising, I knew that I wanted to learn about fundraising. So I signed up for a free online workshop on fundraising. And then one of the speakers on there, was talking about how he had secured about, I think, 700,000 USD, only a few years after graduating for his startup. And I was very impressed and inspired by what he was doing. So then I sent him an email afterwards and said, hey, I saw your talk, was really impressed by it. Would you be free to kind of talk a bit more? And then we called, and now, he's an advisor in my business today still. And he was a huge help in actually, getting us ready to start fundraising. So, that's kind of an example where that's not a networking event. People weren't going there. People were going there to listen to him talk. They weren't going there to try and connect with him. So there I had little competition, in terms of actually networking. And, and I could make a good impression at the same time, kind of create my own warm intro, like, hey, I was just in your talk. So that's like a semi-warm intro. But yeah, I mean, just kind of all over the place, always making sure you're talking to interesting people. Is kind of a great starting point. And LinkedIn, I'd say, is a great tool as well. But just keep in mind that you have to really stand out on LinkedIn, because everybody's messaging everyone with like this long message, trying to sell their services or whatever nonsense, and no one ever reads it. So you really want to catch their attention, send them something very short, very personalized, and you might well get some responses.
So I'm going to move to a different question, which is, you've mentioned this previously, that you've secured a pre-seed round for your startup around 160K British pounds from SFC Capital after winning a competition and a fellowship grant. When receiving a pre-seed round from an investor, what is the procedure of getting this seed money into the company's portfolio, and how the investors get their shares from the startup, assuming if they got shares? What would be the conditions to receive investments for a startup, and what should the startup of the CEO of the startup expect?
Yeah, sure. So it usually depends whether, it depends on what amount you're raising. It depends what stage your company's at. It depends whether you're raising institutional funds, like from venture capital funds, or from angel investors. So those tend to be, more kind of individuals with smaller tickets. Yeah, I'd say, well, when it comes to raising from a VC, the process is essentially you have an initial pitch meeting with them, where you just call with one of their analysts for half an hour or so. You pitch to them, they ask you questions. If they like what they see, they will invite you for another call, where they usually have at least like another analyst on, or they have potentially the principal. And it depends what size the fund is, but you usually have like 2 or 3 meetings. And at that point, they will usually then, if they're still interested, obviously at any point, they can drop off. But if they're still interested, they'll at that point probably give you a term sheet. And a term sheet is basically then it's not legally binding, by the way, so they don't actually have to, stick by it. But it's like a letter of intent. It's kind of saying, we would be willing to offer you this much money at this valuation, pending due diligence, and these are some of the terms that we would like. So, for example, terms that they might like is if the company shuts down, that they that they kind of have first dibs, or like to use a more technical term, it's kind of preferential dilution rights, which means that if the company were to or not dilution rights, sorry, but liquidation preferences, I mean. And then if the company were to fold, that they would be able to, take most of the money and assets that are still remaining to try and recoup their investment. There are other things, like, for example, they might want a board seat. There are a bunch of standard terms. But definitely discuss it with someone who really knows what they're talking about. Usually the terms would be reasonable, I would assume. And then basically at that point, you start a process called due diligence, or DD for short, which is basically where they will ask you a million questions, want to see a million different documents and pieces of evidence and so on. And that can take anything from a couple of weeks to months. And then if they are still happy to go ahead, then their internal investment committee will review everything and then basically decide, do we go ahead or not? And then if they say we go ahead, basically then that's it. Everyone signs the agreements and they transfer the funds. So that whole process from start to finish can take months. It's quite normal for it to take a couple of months. In our case, for our pre-seed round, it took about 3 weeks from start to end. So it was a lot quicker. But we also had a great investor that we were working with. So that's kind of on the institutional side. When it comes to angel investors, things are significantly less predictable. So some angels might want to conduct a lot of due diligence for themselves. Some angels might not want to do any due diligence because they're happy to trust that your lead investor did their due diligence and they can just kind of piggyback on that. Usually, if you have a lead investor who's conducting due diligence, you kind of don't want to be doing a lot of additional due diligence with individual angels, because let's say you have, 5 or 10 of them, and they're all asking you different things. It's going to become a bit overwhelming and spread you very thin. So usually angels, should kind of, be happy with the lead investor conducting those checks for them. But it really varies, so angels are very individual and have their own kind of process. I hope that gives a good kind of rough overview of the process.
But here's the thing. So can you consult a lawyer about the things that the, let's say, VC asked on? So if they have a set of things that they say, hey, we want, let's say, first liquidation rights, for example, and they need other stuff, can I take this paper, take it to a lawyer, and then consolidate with a lawyer that has, let's say, experience with startups, so I can see if this is a fair agreement or if it's not a fair agreement?
Yes, and you absolutely should. You absolutely should, seek legal advice on that. I mean, we in the UK, there's a fantastic kind of early stage startup law firm called Seed Legals, who are kind of like a law tech platform, and they have people in that team, who can help out. So that's great if you're in the UK. But wherever you are in the world, absolutely yes, it's worth speaking to a law firm, like a sort of a fundraising specialist law firm about the terms, and just to see if they are reasonable or not.
And when it comes to getting investment from a VC and an angel investor, the paperwork are still the same, but it's only the difference between a company or an individual, or there's other jurisdictions around that?
In my experience, it's usually the same, especially if they're investing in the same kind of way. Like, it depends whether they're investing in a sort of a funding round directly, or if they are investing through a convertible note or a safe. I'm using the American terms for those. They're called something slightly different in the UK, but essentially it's, where you get like a safe, for example, is where you get the money in now, and then the investor will get shares when the next funding round closes. So when the next kind of batch of shares are issued. But yes, I mean, usually the paperwork would be pretty much the same, but the VC might have, additional paperwork as part of their due diligence process. So they might want to conduct a background check on you as the founder, which in my case, they did conduct a background check on me, and a few other things just to make sure that they're kind of complying with what they need to do as well. But the actual investment paperwork itself should be the same.
Also, do some of those investors ask for, let's say, percentage of the company or board meeting rights, so they would dictate how the startup or the company works at some level?
A smart VC wouldn't. Not obviously they want to have some control and influence, but a good investor will be there to support you, but not want to try and overly control things, because ultimately, they are backing you as the founding team. They're believing in you to, carry out the vision better than anyone else. That's why they're backing you. So yeah, I mean, and yes, it's of course it's very reasonable for them to buy a percentage of the company. Usually, it's not thought about as much as like a percentage of the company. It's more thought of buying, investing, let's say, £1 million at £10 million valuation or something like that. The other distinction is in the US, people talk about post-money valuations. So, for example, in the US, if I say, investing at a 10 million valuation, 1 million at a 10 million valuation, that means that after you receive the $1 million, the company's then worth 10 million. So essentially you're buying 10%. Whereas in the UK or Europe, if you're talking about investing at a 10 million kind of valuation, you're talking about pre-money. So then the post-money valuation is 11 million. So then your percentage at that point, 1 out of 11 is less than 10%. So that's also something just to be mindful of, kind of difference between pre and post-money valuations. But yeah, I hope that kind of covers it well enough.
But as a startup owner, why would you aim towards securing funds from an investor or an incubator than trying to fund the startup from using your own money? Like, for example, there are certain startups that they were able to sustain themselves and thrive from, let's say, their own customers by being self-funded. So there's some people who can, let's say, code the solution on their own, and they could sell the product through marketing tactics, or they have an audience and they can sell it in. But as someone who's trying to raise money, why would I want to raise money in the first place?
Well, I think if you can build your company without raising money, then you shouldn't. But it's not necessarily that simple. Yes, you might be able to build the product, which I think it's important, by the way, to have all the core skills necessary for your company to operate on a basic level within the founding team. So that means if you're a tech company, you need a technically proficient person as a founder. So that's very, very important. I mean, when it comes to fundraising itself, it also depends, like, in what industry are you, what barriers are there, how are you going to scale? So for example, if you're building a social network, you probably need to have millions of users on there before it can even generate any money at all. For example. Or if it's like some kind of B2B software company, you might need a lot of funding to hire developers to build up the product to a level where, a very large Fortune 500 company would be actually interested in buying that, over something that a much larger, competitor of yours could kind of string together. So it depends ultimately. I think the best place to start is with what are you trying to achieve? How far do you want the company to go? But ultimately, let's say, for argument's sake, you identified a certain tech product that you can build and you can kind of market by yourself. So you can bootstrap and get it off the ground. but you have a really good idea and there's a lot of demand for it, which obviously let's hope there would be. What's to stop someone then from building a competing platform, raising a lot of money, charging less, or even releasing it for free, and then just completely eating away your market share, basically taking away all your customers. So that's something to keep in mind as well. That's absolutely something that happens. So yeah, I mean, long story short, not every startup has to fundraise, but certain types of startups absolutely do. And it just depends what you're looking to do. Like, are you trying to build a lifestyle business that provides a passive income, or are you trying to build something that's going to be the next unicorn, multi-billion-dollar company? And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just whatever is true to what you actually want to do.
So I'm going to move to a different question, which is you started BuySellJobs at 15 and exited afterwards. Why would someone at the age of 15 consider the idea of starting something at that age and exit it? I understand that your heart was fixed on freelancing conditions, but why would a 15-year-old consider the idea of creating his own solution? So we got back to the idea of I found a problem, I created a solution for it, but you started it at the age of 15. Why did this happen?
I don't know. I've always kind of been that way. If I see something that I think is inefficient or not the right way, I'll always try and do something about it. It's not that I choose to. It's just kind of I would need to stop myself if I wanted to. But yeah, I mean, I started freelancing. I saw that the existing platforms just really weren't working right. I thought they were very outdated back in, this was in late 2014. By the way, they haven't changed until the present day, which is why I'm back again with Revolancer. But I already decided back then that they were kind of garbage. They weren't serving freelancers right. And then I decided, well, I can build my own platform and try and do a better job. And I actually didn't choose to exit. Well, I guess I sort of did, but I was kind of forced to, because I was using PayPal to handle payments through the platform, but PayPal kept on closing my accounts and asking me to verify that I'm older than 18, which I couldn't do. So I did that a few times. Then I realized that isn't going to work anymore. Asked my parents if I could have a PayPal account in their name to keep operating this. They said, no way, we don't want to lose the house. So that didn't work. So basically, I ended up just going online and I found a buyer who bought the platform from me just before my 16th birthday. So it was a really, really good experience. Also made definitely a nice chunk of money for someone my age out of that. And it kind of set the foundation of really understanding this industry, and being able to get started with Revolancer.
So I'm going to move to a different question, which is you were also the youngest ever brand ambassador for Britain's largest business conference, the Business Show. From 2015 to 2018, you had a stall and gave keynote speeches. At this age, teenagers would prefer to hang out and do things with their friends, whereas you prefer to go on conferences and give talks. I've been in a similar situation where I would skip school to go coding competitions and hackathons. But what made you take this kind of decision at a young age? Now, I would give myself the reason why I did this is because I just love coding and I just want to go to a place where people would do it and just have fun. But I don't know about your position about this.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I guess I'm not particularly normal. um, I've always kind of had my interests, which have not always been I guess what's normal for sort of a teenager or whoever to be interested in. But it's just it's what I wanted to do. I wasn't really interested in school. I wasn't really interested in partying or whatever at that age. But I was interested in trying to start a business and and really accomplish something, and really change the freelancing industry for the better even back then. So that was what I was interested in, and well, do what you like.
And at 18, you founded RocketBlast Digital and opened a first high street office. You've worked with clients like the NHS, the Natural Health Service, and Harlow College. Your main aim was to provide transparent and straightforward pricing and deliver project delivery, an approach that is uncommon in the agency space. Would you like to talk more about your experience doing your own agency? Why did you resolve to creating one in the first place? And why did you think nearby agencies weren't transparent with their clients?
Yeah, sure. So basically, this is another great example of where I saw something that I thought wasn't working as it should. So I, immediately just went to try and create a solution to it. Um, well, essentially, as a freelancer, I worked with different agencies over the years, kind of growing up, and I saw how they operated, and also working directly with clients. When I was building websites and so on for them, I would often, take over their website, update it, and then just, be exposed to what their previous developers, or agency in this case, were charging them, what they were actually getting in return, what the process was like. And I was absolutely horrified because, in my view, they were being very often completely overcharged, oftentimes being charged for absolute nonsense things that they either didn't need or didn't even happen. The support was terrible. Just, all of this kind of mess. Essentially, what it boils down to is I felt that people, sort of these agencies were taking advantage of the fact that, some of these customers didn't have much technical knowledge. So, because of that, I decided to start my own agency and be a lot more kind of transparent and fair about pricing. It meant that our pricing was quite a bit lower than other agencies in the area. Of course, something that I think I was too naive at the time to realize is there is a reason why they're charging more. There is they have other costs. I still believe that there is some level of overcharging in some cases and taking advantage of clients' lack of technical expertise. But then equally, I don't think that's always the case. And I did kind of learn my lesson as well doing Rocket Blast, that sometimes, you can do something with, kind of good faith in mind, trying to, give a client the best possible price. But then sometimes they will just keep demanding more and more and more and more. And if you gave them a fixed price, or as an agency would charge hourly, what can you really do? I mean, ideally you need to agree on kind of a concrete brief up front. But yeah, I mean, it was a really good experience. We also set up an office on my local high street, which was a really stupid idea because anything that could have been, kind of going into profits just went to rent. We didn't need an office. It was a vanity metric. I just wanted to say like, hey, look at me in my office. But it did actually lead to meeting a guy who co-founded a company that's now worth billions called Just Eat, a takeaway delivery service in the UK and Europe. And I wouldn't have met him had I not kind of opened that office. And he's an advisor for Revolancer today. And without his advice, I'm pretty certain that at least in the early stages, we wouldn't have progressed much further than we actually ended up doing. So I think it all worked out very nicely, but yeah, it was just kind of a good experience along the road.
So the office was worth it.
Yes, I think so, but that doesn't make it not a stupid idea. I was lucky that it worked out in my favor.
So I'm going to move to a different question, which is during university, you also helped LifeWell as their CMO and interim CTO, goal of helping them find a CTO. What is the role of a CMO, a chief marketing officer, and what is the steps to help startup get noticed in public?
Sure, yeah. So a chief marketing officer, is essentially just the main person in charge of marketing. Their role is to come up with the strategy, mostly, very kind of big picture, high level stuff, and then managing the rest of the marketing department, the kind of delegating, those tasks to individuals within that team. I'd say that the best way for a startup to get noticed is to build a product that people really, really love to use. because that way, essentially marketing becomes a redundant exercise. Like if you think about Tesla, for example, they have never run an ad. They've never, I don't know if you know that, might surprise some people listening, but they've never done any advertising. Yet you know what Tesla is, um, but essentially they follow that principle of they build a product that people really really love, and then those people will be vocal about it to others, and then the product kind of spreads itself. So I'd say, that's the main thing to focus on. Once you have that and you have a product that people really, really love and, talk about and share, then you can look at these paid advertising things to kind of pour fuel on that fire and just make that whole process grow faster. But I think, you have to start with that kind of system. And the way that you optimize for that is you track something called Net Promoter Score, or NPS. And essentially, you'll almost certainly have seen this before. It's basically where a company asks you, how likely are you to recommend this to a friend on a scale of 1 to 10? And that's Net Promoter Score. And basically, what you want to see is the kind of portion of people that select at least an 8. So the people who say 8, 9, and 10, they're your promoters. And basically, you want as many people as possible to be in that range. And then, of course, if you track that, and someone is in that range and you then have an affiliate scheme, you can then, advertise to those people, say, hey, if you refer your friends, we'll give you $5 or whatever it is. And you know that they're going to be the kind of people who want to tell their friends, who are probably on the verge of doing it. So yeah, I'd say that's probably the best thing to focus on to get noticed as a startup.
So it's not about running ads to get noticed, just about creating something, release it in the public, see how people review on it, and if people are interested, you start targeting those people?
Yes, exactly. I'd say that's a much better way to go about it. I mean, ads. So essentially, it's thinking about paid growth versus earned growth. And ads are an example of paid growth. It's great to boost, but it's expensive. And earned growth is always going to be better. So earned growth is things like, getting your net promoter score up by building a product that people love. Organic marketing, such as having good SEO and ranking well on Google. Those things are examples of earned growth, and that's kind of where you want to be focusing most of your attention, especially when you're kind of in the early stages and you are cash poor but time rich. And that's exactly the kind of stuff you want to be focusing on.
Yep. I'm going to shift to a different question, which is you have co-founded Leapinto, a nonprofit organization with a friend called Kevin Mansell-Abell. Am I saying his name right?
Yes, you are.
Where you guys help students with their career concerns by connecting them to industry professionals and opening their eye to the real world work and in the real world. Why would you think that this is something that is needed? What is the difference between, let's say, a career council that is found in a university, and why would you resolve to create this instead of, let's say, joining a university council to help people?
Sure. Well, essentially, Kevin and I are both under the impression that career advice in its current form is broken. So, for example, just kind of saying to a student, like based on your grades or whatever, this is a field you might want to go into, explaining the field. The person who's explaining it has never actually worked in that field, probably. It's just, it just doesn't really make sense to me. So our goal there was essentially to connect young people with somebody who is in the position that they want to be in 5, 10, 15, 20, however many years. Just have a conversation with them and see from them, is this something that they really want to do? So, for example, if you want to start a business, don't speak to a careers consultant. Speak to someone who has started a business. It's kind of it feels like it's common sense to me, but so often that's not how people go about it. So yeah, with Leapinto, we organized a few events. We had quite a lot of support. So we had different universities, colleges, a very large co-working chain company, We had a kind of professional PR. We were in the national news for that. And essentially we had these events where we connected these very accomplished people with young people who might want to be where they are one day. But we learned something very interesting, very, very counterintuitive. So what we found is that it is very easy to get incredibly accomplished people to very generously give up their time, to help out for free. But it was very difficult, bordering on impossible, to actually get any of the kind of students and young people who would be benefiting from this completely for free to actually join or be interested. And we had some like successful sessions, but there was very much a trend, that it's much easier to, for some reason, get the the people who are there as like sort of mentoring to give up their time than the people who would be benefiting from it. So then what both Kevin and I kind of learned from that is that the way that him and I both operate is maybe not the norm, because we both started businesses in university. We both, reached out to a lot of very accomplished people and worked with them to get to the next level. But, kind of the silver lining from that project is that if you want to reach out to these people and really get a head start, there aren't many people doing it. So, you'll be in a very good position. But it's just strange that, people are so unwilling and uninterested to do that on the whole. So it was a very useful learning experience. For the time being, we kind of put that project on hold. I'm sure we'll do something again with it in the future. But for the time being, we're not super interested in, setting up events where we have a lot of really great mentors there, but then, despite working with national press, with universities and colleges, et cetera, just not being able to get the, kind of a right response from the mentee side.
So the hard part is about getting people's attention because they might be focusing on other things than actually focusing on their career or future, if you want to say.
Yes, definitely.
So I'm going to move to a different question, which is, you were the founder and editor-in-chief of The Watch Face, a project that you ran at age 16 till age 18. You've nurtured an online magazine to more than 500,000 readers with 10 contributing writers and an online vintage watch shop. How would a 16-year-old be able to run and reach this level of reach? So assuming the fact that you've created, let's say, an online magazine, you talked about watches, you reached almost 500,000 readers. How were you able to achieve this?
Sure. So very, to the most part, SEO. So in this case, and mostly on-site SEO too. So I did my research, really understood what kind of things Google is looking for when picking what articles to rank, and then picked, very specific titles that people were searching for, made sure that the content was very well optimized to rank for the certain phrases that I wanted to. And then it was just a case of consistently doing that over time. And then also when I had contributors, sort of training them to do that. And then over time, we had hundreds of articles that were all ranking really well, or at least for the most part, ranking really well. And then that, picked up a lot of steam. That was the main part. But then also the other part was reaching out to an audience who would be interested in the kind of content we were publishing within Facebook and Reddit communities. And then publishing there and really understanding how to publish these links in a way that catches a lot of attention. So that was kind of the main thing. But ultimately, it's watches are something that I'm very interested in myself. So I really understood the industry and community quite well, which put me in a good position to write content that people would like to see, and also know where to find other people who would want to read that content. And in fact, that was at one point the second most read watch publication in the UK, which I'm quite proud of. but yeah, that was a very fun kind of passion project that I worked on growing up as well.
So you see a lot of people trying to market themselves. Let's say you market, let's say, the watch face and other products as well, where they're trying to build up to the public, but might lack certain points that they should focus on. You've grasped the idea of marketing oneself and create a product from a very young age, which is quite impressive. But how would you like to talk about your experience on achieving this, or as someone who's good at marketing? What are the steps for someone who wants to begin to market themselves or a product should do, other than, let's say, SEO?
Sure. Well, I mean, the thing is, growing up, I had a lot of time. Well, a lot of time, where I should be doing school probably, but I was ignoring that, so I had a lot of time, um, and I didn't have a lot of money. So, I couldn't just go and give money to lots of different SEO agencies, for example, and just see if, maybe that would work out. I couldn't because, I had virtually nothing. So I had no choice but to learn how to do it myself. And it's not just SEO. There are lots of things that I learned how to do myself, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to. And I would say that, even if you can afford to outsource these things, there's real value in learning how to do things yourself. Which is something that I'm very grateful for. I'm very glad that I was in a position where I had to do that, because frankly, if I had funds to avoid doing that, I probably would have. So I'm very grateful actually that I couldn't do that. I couldn't take any shortcuts, because it's put me in a really good position now. Yeah. So when it comes to marketing and learning more about marketing, I'd say probably the main thing is you want to be careful about what like sources of information you use, because in the marketing industry, there are lots of people who are, good at marketing, but they're really interested in marketing like their course or marketing them being good. I mean, I've never kind of bought an online course, and that's not to say that that's in any way, shape, or form not a good idea, but there is so much that you can learn online for free that I don't see the need to get a course necessarily when you're just starting out. Um, so yeah, I mean, as for something more specific, it really depends on what it is you're building, what it is you're trying to market, and what kind of age of audience, what demographics, etc. You're trying to target. But there are so many free resources available online. So definitely, go out there and learn as much as you can.
So I'm going to move to a different question, which is you're based in the UK, but you lived in South Africa, Germany, England, and now Wales. Do you think that your upbringing in different countries have affected your views on how things work in the world? And did it affect your way of doing business in general?
I would say so, yes. It's definitely affected my view of the world. For example, I'm not a particularly kind of patriotic person. I personally see very little point in that, because to be proud of the country that you were born in, it's not something you control. It's not really an achievement. You were lucky that you were born in the situation that you are. Or maybe you were unlucky that you were born in the situation that you are. But either way, you didn't choose it. It was, or like, it wasn't your accomplishment, or or your failure either. Um, so yeah, it's definitely affected how I kind of see things. And when it comes to working with other people, I don't know if this has to do with growing up in different countries, but just really, when I'm working with others, I'm um, very keen on like sort of working with them in a way that works for them, and kind of meeting them where they are, to kind of have the best working relationship with them as possible, because that way, they also produce the best outputs, and everyone's happy doing it. So yeah, I don't know if that has anything to do with growing up in different countries, but it might.
No, because some people might have, let's say, certain sympathies towards people from other countries, or they might see that, I might create something, a solution that can benefit, let's say, X people in a certain way.
Absolutely. Yeah. So growing up, I grew up in a very fortunate position, but in a country where many people were and continue today to struggle a lot. So I've always wanted to do something useful where I can and kind of give back. Especially coming from a position where that's something that I already can do to some level.
Yeah. I'm going to move to a different question, which is you studied artificial intelligence and robotics at Albers. I have a
Aberystwyth.
very I have a very hard time actually reading the name. Can you please say it?
Yeah, it's Aberystwyth.
University in Wales. What made you consider studying AI and robotics now with the rise of AI in big companies and coding bootcamps teaching you AI without the need to go to university to learn it?
Well, yeah, but I mean, I studied it. Well, I started studying 5 years ago, so graduated 2 years ago. So the world was in a slightly, different place than today when it comes to AI and people's interest and the sort of accessibility of it, and just the exposure of AI in the public domain, in the media right now. Um, I went to study it because I thought it would be very useful for whatever kind of business project I wanted to do. I always looked at it from that perspective. I was never interested in kind of finding a job and working for someone else. So I thought it would be it would give me good credibility and be very, very useful subject to learn about for a business that I'm looking to start. And it's also something I really enjoy and find very interesting. So, a combination of those things made me decide to study it.
So I always end the podcast with a mental health question. This is something that I always do. Have you ever faced burnout or imposter syndrome? And if you did, what did you do to resolve towards this issue?
Yeah, so imposter syndrome, yes, absolutely. I have. I continue to in a lot of ways on a day to day basis. That's a difficult one, I'd say. Probably the best way to think about it is that having imposter syndrome is actually, in some ways, a good thing, experiencing that, because it means that one, you have empathy, and two, um, just that if you wouldn't, you're having imposter syndrome because you feel like you are in a room where you don't belong, metaphorically speaking. So it means that you are constantly pushing yourself higher and higher rather than just going for kind of easily attainable goals. So it's a good sign. So that one I kind of embrace. When it comes to burnout, yes, absolutely, I have burnt myself out terribly in the past. I am much better at avoiding it now. In fact, after I burned myself out quite badly a few months after starting Revolancer, before we raised investment. But I haven't since then. And the reason why is because I can kind of spot the warning signs. But ultimately, with burnout, the best thing that I have found that's helped me, because I'm someone who's very prone to overworking myself. But the thing that's helped me the most is a very simple quote. But if you actually take a moment to think about it, I think it's helped me a lot. And that is that starting a business is a marathon, not a sprint. And, the very key thing there is that in a marathon, you purposefully have to run slower than you could for pretty much the whole race, to actually finish it and be consistent with your pace. And that is, I think, what really kind of helped me understand that. So even if I do still have the energy to work for another 1, 2, 3, however many hours, or if I have the energy to work on the weekend, choosing not to, quitting while I'm ahead. And then over time, that means you're far less likely to burn out. So that's how it helped me a lot, and hopefully it can be valuable to someone else listening as well.
So you reached a position that you said, no, I have to overwork and do a lot of things because I feel like I'm not doing enough. And then you've overworked yourself much more than normal to the point that you can't even do regular work.
Yes, exactly. Which is such a silly thing to do. You know.
I don't think
Yeah.
it's a silly thing. It's just like you feel you want to do something as fast as you can so you can get things done, but turns out not things sometimes don't work the same way. I've burnt myself really hard actually, and I do relate to this. Like you want to do a lot of things at a very short interval, and then you find a lot of people telling you like do yoga and then read books and then socialize, go to the gym and do a lot of things. And then you also have to do, let's say, uh, you have your own business and then you have to do other stuff as well, which is can be time consuming and self consuming at some level.
Yes, absolutely. But I'd also say when it comes to burnout prevention and so on, like, yes, meditation, yoga, this kind of stuff might work for some people. It might not work for other people. And you can, anything might or might not work for someone. So I think the important thing is just finding what works for you, like what actually relaxes you. Like for me, for example, I found that playing chess, which, you'd think is probably quite a mentally consuming task, and it absolutely is. But playing chess relaxes me more than anything else. It's very, very strange, but I know that about myself, and I can use it now. So that's just an example, right? So I'd much rather play chess than do yoga, for example, or meditate. I don't think either of those things would be particularly helpful. I have tried meditation; it's never worked for me. I know it works very well for a lot of people, though. But just kind of stressing the point that you need to do what works for you, not really, not just what other people say to do.
Thank you so much for listening to the episode. If you liked it, then feel free to watch our previous episodes and feel free to follow us on social media and rate us on your favorite podcast app of choice.